Hello everyone and welcome to the last session of the day. We'd like to thank everyone for joining us. We're so thrilled to have Jaime Casap, Education Evangelist, giving us our closing keynote. We really appreciate you being with us here today. A few bits of information about the session. If you're new to the session, you'll know we've got chat in the right-hand side. So please do ask questions. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget you can catch up on all these sessions on our platform after the event. We're uploading all the sessions so you can catch up to a month after the show's finished. We're also on social media. If you want to connect with us there, follow @GuessEducation on Twitter and use the hashtag #GuessEdTech. And now I'd like to hand it over to you, Jaime. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, and welcome everyone to my studio here in Phoenix, Arizona. I always like to take a picture of these to keep them because who knows if we're ever going to be in this kind of situation again. I hope not. Let me do a little bit of an introduction, and as I speak and as I kind of talk about the things that I want to talk about, I want to make sure that everyone understands that I want to leave some time at the end to answer questions. So whether you already have questions or whether something that I say makes you think of a question, make sure you jot those down, and then we're going to go through those questions at the end. Okay, so I am the former Chief Education Evangelist at Google. I was at Google for 15 years. I launched Google Apps for Education into the university space that we now call G Suite back in 2006 here in Arizona at the Arizona State University campus. That's where we launched it. Just two of us worked on that for a very long time. I got more involved in education and education technology. I launched Google Apps into K-12 a couple years later. But the craziest idea I had was launching Chromebooks into education when Chromebooks were not an education tool. Chromebooks were designed for the enterprise world. They were designed for users, but they were not designed for education. I convinced a bunch of people internally that we should launch this in education, and the rest is history. I recently left Google a couple of months ago to pursue other opportunities in the diversity, inclusion, and equity space in education, right? So I think that from two of us that started this team back at Google, I think now when I left, there were like 200 people on the team. And so I think that they're in good hands, and it's time for me to go focus on other work that I want to focus on. So that's what I'm currently doing. I'm working on a number of projects. If you want to learn more about the kinds of projects that I'm working on, you should subscribe to my YouTube channel because I'm doing a lot of videos based on the projects that I'm working on. So you should go subscribe to that. Anyway, what I want to talk about right now is the future and a little bit about the future of education in terms of how it relates to what we're experiencing. Because I think what we need to think about is this concept of education as a concept that helps us take on the future. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of people in my position, a lot of people who have my view who will say something like, education is broken. Education needs to be transformed. Education has to change. And the reality is those things are true to some degree, but when you really think about it, there's nothing wrong with the education system. Education system isn't broken per se because it's producing results better than it produced them 20 years ago, 60 years ago, 100 years ago. Here in the United States, for example, high school graduation rates are the highest they've ever been in history. The content that we teach students today is stronger than it's ever been. So I don't look at it as the education is broken or it doesn't work. That's not the right way to think about this. I think what we need to understand is that education is doing exactly what it was designed to do for the world and the economy that it faced 150 years ago. That it handled it really well. That system handled the economy that it was dealing with. What we need to understand and realize is that it's not that education needs to change, it's that the world has changed and we need to adjust to it. that we now live in what I call the digitalization era. And by digitalization, I mean everything that has to do with technology, right? It's machine learning, artificial intelligence, AR, VR, automation, robotics, all the things, the Internet of Things, everything that has to do with programmable things. That digitalization, we are in that phase now. And as much as we think it's become part of our lives, because we carry little computers in our pockets, we have to understand that we are literally at the very, 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 very beginning of this age. Very beginning. We're like cavemen compared to where we're going to be in the next 20, 30 years. I'll give you an example that illustrates this. A couple months before I left Google had a breakthrough in quantum computing. And I'm not going to get into defining quantum computing or what it is, but it's the next thing. And the breakthrough that Google had with quantum computing is just amazing. If you took a mathematical equation, right, one of those things that spins forever, and you fed it to a supercomputer, the world's most powerful supercomputer, it would take that supercomputer 10,000 years to process that equation. The breakthrough that Google had in quantum computing is that they did it in 300 seconds. Now, they didn't do this, on a MacBook Pro. They did this in a giant room with scientists and lab coats and gigantic servers and all this other stuff that they needed to power something like that. But 10,000 years versus 300 seconds. Think about where we are on that spectrum. We are at 10,000 years right now. We're going to be at 300 seconds. When? That's a question. That's a debatable question. But we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of what digitalization is going to mean. Now, given that, what we need to think about in education is a couple of things. One, are we preparing students for that world? Are we giving them the skills and the knowledge that they need to operate in a digitalized world? Because that's where everything is headed. And at the same time, are we teaching them skills? Are we teaching them content? Are we teaching them things that we already know machines can do better already? And so if machines can do it better, why are we teaching them these skills? So for example, having students memorize dates, for example, when you can just ask your phone for a date. Having students, remember things that we know computers can remember better than we can. Those things we have to look at and ask ourselves, what is the right model for the future that we face? Understanding that. And again, we're at the very beginning of this. And the pandemic is only going to create a huge growth in this space. Because if you think about the pandemic from a business perspective, if you think about it from a COO's perspective, what you need to understand is that what was the most important factor over the past 6 months? What was the biggest risk to your business over the past 6 to 8 months? And what you realize is that it's people. People doing repetitive work, people doing process work, people doing manual labor work. And so if you're good at your business, no matter what it's in, what you're going to try to do is eliminate people from that process as much as possible because you don't want to be in the situation again. So if you're gathering people in a manufacturing plant, or if you're gathering people in a factory, or if you're gathering people at a meat plant, or if you're gathering people in a call center, if you're gathering people at a customer service location, if you're gathering people in any of these places, what you're going to do is you're going to try to eliminate those people as much as you can. And digitalization is going to allow you to do that. And it's only going to get faster because you're starting to see it already happen, right? Technology, digitalization happened slowly, right? It happened gradually, and then it happened a little bit faster as the years went on, right? Take a supermarket, right? A grocery store. We went from taking cans and putting labels on these cans to being able to use a cash register, to using a more automated cash register, to scanning things, to self-scanning. Like You see digitalization impact the workflow of a grocery store. And now when you go to Singapore or any other, modern country, what you'll notice is that there are barely any people working in those stores at all. You have automated cashiering, you have self-checkout, you have delivery services where one day you're just going to be able to go online, click all the things that you want. A robot's going to go into the store, take everything off the shelves for you, put it in a box, and bring it to you in a robot delivery truck, right? We're a couple of years from that. Here in this country, for example, 4.5 million people make a living driving things, driving supplies, driving equipment, driving people when we used to go out. And you can buy a self-driving car today. What is that going to look like in the next 10 years? So we got to look at that future and understand that we are now in expedited growth when it comes to digitalization. And so it's important to understand what we need to teach our students given this world. And the first thing we have to understand is that what we need to focus on, what we need to double down on are human skills, right? We used to call them, I call them human skills. There's other names for them. People call them 21st century skills. I don't like the term 21st century skills for two reasons. Number one, we're 20 years into the 21st century. We're 21 years into the 21st century. And I feel like when you say when you tell students you need to focus on 21st century skills, what you're saying is those skills are for the future. You need those skills for the future, 21st century down there. But the reality is that those students need those skills right now. My 6-year-old needs those skills. When my 6-year-old gets up every day and goes to school, the things that I think about are how is she building her human skills, not how is she learning a subject. I could care less what the subjects are as long as she's focused on the human skills, problem solving, collaboration, the ability to learn, critical skills, creativity. Those are the most important things. If you want to call them anything, people call them soft skills. That's a trigger word for me. I don't think that they're soft. I think they're critical skills that are necessary given this future. And we have to ask ourselves, how are we teaching our students these skills inside the context of an education system? In addition to those, and I want to come back to these human skills here, we have to make sure that we're helping them develop the skills when it comes to digitalization. And what I mean by that is this is the generation that has been born into technology, right? We give them a pass. We've told them that they're digital natives, right? We tell them they were born with technology, therefore they naturally know how to use all these tools. And the truth is they don't know how to use these tools. They don't know anything about these tools. And what we need to do is take a step back and really focus on developing their digitalization skills. And this is important because whatever solution, whether they become business owners or whether they go work somewhere or whether they start nonprofits or education systems, whatever they end up doing, whatever solution they're going to come up with is going to have a digitalized element to it. It's just will. It doesn't matter what they end up doing. They're going to need to understand how digitalization works. That's one of the most critical components. An example, I'm here in downtown Phoenix and I need to get to the Phoenix airport. And that's the problem that I'm trying to solve. But let's say I don't know that cars exist, that I have no concept of cars. What kinds of solutions would I come up with to get me to the airport? I might come up with a great bike solution. I might come up with a great walking solution, and I might even get it down to what time I need to leave my house to get to the airport at a certain time. I might come down to the safest route, the fastest route. I might come up with great solutions given what I know. But if I don't know that cars exist, am I going to come up with the best solution? And so we need to make sure that our students understand digitalization. And I'm not just talking about searching and vetting, and I'm talking about basic things like, how does the internet work? How do computers work? How does fiber work? How is it that we are talking to each other right now? Because at the end of the day, those basic things are the baseline of what digitalization is going to look like. And on top of that, we want to make sure that they're learning the most important skills in this space. For example, we want to make sure that they're building their computational thinking skills, that they know what algorithms are, that they know how to do abstractions, that they know how to do parallel operations. Those types of basic human things in problem solving, what we would call computational thinking, falls under the problem solving bucket. And I'm working with an organization called Plethora, who is focused on doing this with students in a gamification kind of way. That's one example of the kind of work that we can do in this space. So it becomes important to focus on organizations like that are teaching these basic things. They're not teaching students how to code. That's not what we want to teach them. We want to teach them computational thinking, how to create algorithms, abstractions, parallel operations. These concepts are about problem solving, not about technology. And so that's an important element that we need to focus on. We want to make sure that they understand that they have to have the ability to learn. Like, one of the most important things that I think about my daughter is how is she learning? Does she know how to learn? The pandemic has been a great example of how our students aren't very good at learning by themselves, that we've created control and compliance in our schools where our students were sitting in a room and teachers were focused on their students, and they told them, read this page, read that page, do this, here's your assignment. We tell them, we prescribe to them exactly what they need to do, and now they're all home and they don't know how to learn. So how do we make sure our students know how to learn? Because one of the things that we need to understand with digitalization is that we're going to have to constantly learn. So this concept of lifelong learning isn't so much a nice thing anymore. It's a necessary thing. So do our students know how to learn on their own? And it starts with kind of this self-awareness model that is, I know I can learn how to do anything if I know where I can learn how to do it. So I talk to lots of adults who say to me, I'm not very creative, or I'm not good with technology. And my response to them is, and this is why I don't have a lot of friends, but my response to them is, well, it's not that you don't know how to do those things. It's that you've chosen not to do those things. It's your choice. Because everything that you need to be creative is out in the world. Everything that you need to be good at technology is out in the world. If you want to start learning how to program, you can learn right now. Everything is out there. But it's important to have that self-awareness for our students so that they don't say, I'm bad at math, or I'm not good with technology, or I'm not good with being creative. That they understand that there's a process to learn, and that if they walk through that process, they can learn anything. And that becomes an important concept, because this idea that you go to school and you graduate from secondary education, or you graduate from university, or you graduate from graduate school and then you're done, that world doesn't exist anymore. It wasn't true 25 years ago when I graduated from graduate school, and it's certainly not true today. So that concept of the ability to learn, to me, is one of the most important things that we can focus on. So these human skills, problem solving, creativity, the ability to learn, critical thinking, those things inside subject matter is absolutely important. Now, the one thing that the benefit of being able to do this is that we now live in a long tail economy. We now live in a space where anyone can pick up a machine and start a solution. I don't like to say start a business, because sometimes it's not about a business, it's about solving problems. And so anyone can pick up a machine and start solving a problem. And so for me, I want to stop asking our students a question that we've been asking them for years, which is, what do you want to be when you grow up? Right? We still ask students that question. What do you want to be when you grow up? And the truth is that question doesn't make sense anymore. We have to recognize and appreciate the fact that question used to make sense a long time ago, but that question doesn't make sense anymore. And what we should be asking them instead is what problem do you want to solve? What's the problem that spins in your head? And then it doesn't have to be a social problem. It doesn't have to be climate change. It doesn't have to be, solving world hunger. It could be making better cameras, making better lights. It could be making cars go faster, making a better color blue, whatever it is. What's that problem that you want to solve? And then the second question, and this is where it becomes about the individual, how do you want to solve that problem? And that's an important question, because there's a million ways to solve a problem. And if a student goes to you and says, for example, I want to solve climate change, you might say to them, oh, climate change, you need to go get a degree in global sustainable development, or you need to get a degree in environmental science. But the reality is that that might not be where their best skills are. How do you want to solve the problem means, how do you want to take your gifts, your talents, your experiences, your passions, and solve that problem? Because that student might be a gifted photographer. And I resonate with this because I am a closet photographer. It's, if you go to my Instagram account, you'll see a lot of my photography out there. I love photography, and I love students who are gifted photographers. And if this student is a gifted photographer, then the way they might be able to solve climate change is by going out and documenting climate change, or telling stories about climate change, or bringing emotion, human emotion, to the concept of climate change, right? So it doesn't mean that you are interested in one subject, that there's only one way to solve that problem. Students need to understand themselves. And this goes back to the self-awareness about where their talents and skills are, so that they can use those to solve the problem that they're passionate about. And then the third question that we should ask them is, what do they need to know to solve that problem? What are the knowledge, the skills, and the abilities that they need to have to solve that problem? And how can they start building those knowledge, skills, and abilities? Because they literally have the world at their fingertips. And this goes back to this idea of the ability to learn. If they have the ability to learn, what do they need to know? How do they know it? What information is out there? Who's solving that problem now? What do they know? Who can you work with? Who can you collaborate with? What information is out there that you can take on and solve the problem that you're passionate about? To me, that's what the future of education looks like, given this digitalization era that we're facing. Things are going to be moving faster and faster. Focusing on human skills that our students need around problem solving, critical thinking, collaboration, ability to learn, creativity. Those are what are going to be the essential skills, along with some what we call hard skills around digitalization, like computational thinking, abstraction, algorithm development, those things, to understand that that fits into problem solving. And those are the foundations of this digitalized era. And focusing on those human skills and doubling down on those human skills, because at the end of the day, it's not machines versus humans, right? This isn't the Matrix. This isn't Terminator. This isn't one of those things where who's going to win, the machines or the humans. That's not what this is about. This is about collaboration. This is about not competition, but cooperation, where humans are going to take all the development that we have with digitalization and solve problems, human problems that we're passionate about. And if our students can't do that, then I don't have a lot of hope for our future. So I'm hoping that we can take the education model that served us well for a very, very long time, understand that now we face a different future. And as those of us in education, those of us who have leadership positions, we can say, understand what the future is, and then understand what are the things that we need to do to transform what learning looks like, so our students are prepared for that future. And with that, I will pause, and I'd love to answer any questions that you guys might have. Okay, I was waiting for somebody to come on and moderate the questions. But okay. Oh, there they are. Hi, Sarah.
Sorry about that. Okay, so one of the first questions we've had come in says, what made you think to launch Chromebooks into the education sector?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because I saw Chromebooks, usually, a tool has to solve a problem. And what I saw the Chromebook do is solve two problems. And that's a rare thing, right? So this idea that what I saw was a lot more usage of technology in education. I saw a lot more one-on-one things. I mean, this is in the middle of the iPad revolution, right? So I saw lots of schools taking on iPads. And then I saw what schools were doing with netbooks and smaller window machines. And I saw this, and the problems were twofold. The first problem was user problems. It was about the fact that a machine might take 10 minutes to boot up, or that they always crashed, or that you couldn't share them because all the user information was on the machine, right? They were expensive. The battery didn't last a long time. There were a lot of problems. I have an iPad. I love my iPad, but the iPad, well, it didn't have a lot of functionality to it, or if you drop it, it would break instantly. There was a lot of issues on the user side when it comes to technology and computing. And then you had problems on the administration side, which was around how do you keep everything safe and secure? How do you keep viruses out of your system? How do you create a really good, one-on-one program where students can take machines home? Because if they go home, they're going to log into bad websites and they're going to bring those to school. And how do you if you want to put a new application on your computer, you want to lock it, you have to re-image them all. And, if you take 500 iPads over the summer, you have to go and plug them all in and redo the software. Like, it was lots of problems on both sides. And when I saw the Chromebook, this machine that basically said, it turns on in 5 seconds. And if you can use a browser, you know how to use this machine. Everything's in the cloud, and you can log in with any credentials and have your stuff. And they last all day. They're cheaper. All those user benefits, absolutely there. But the real benefits were on the administration side. Because it was a web-based tool, you could create functionality that you can pitch out to all your users. You can create organizational units so that the fourth grade, when they log in, they get these 5 things. When the 8th graders log in, they get these 10 things, right? Like, you can customize. The updates were automatic. You can create a closed ecosystem no matter where the machines are, so that they had to log in through your credentials in your school network. There were so many benefits on both sides. And that's what I saw the value of Chromebooks. And I was right, and it kind of took off.
Okay. This one's a big question. What is better for distance learning, Google or Microsoft?
What was the question?
What is better for distance learning, Google or Microsoft? I suppose it depends.
Well, look, I don't work at Google anymore, so and I've always answered this question honestly. Yeah. I think so here's the deal, and this is a true story. I'm working on a project right now, and this specific organization uses Word, right? And so I have Word on my machine, and I write a document, and then I send it, and then we had a meeting last night, and they had some feedback. I'm like, send me your feedback. So now they got to send me feedback. I have to look through that feedback, create another version of that document, and send it like that. I can do it, but it's a hassle. And I know Microsoft has their online platforms and all that, but that's not what this organization is using. Now, another project I'm working on, the whole script is on Google Doc. And I can see in real time everybody's comments, what they're doing. I can go in there and edit it. And whatever document I'm in, that's the latest version. So that's just one example for me as to you can use both tools, but one is clearly better than the other, right? And so I think it's more important to think about this. And I've always said this is, what is it that you're doing? What's the work that you're doing? And then ask yourself, what's the best tool for that? That it's not one thing over another, that you can use Google Docs and Outlook, and you can use, Google Sheets and Microsoft Teams, right? It's not one thing. It's finding the right tool for the job that you're focused on.
This one's an interesting one. In your view, given your experience, what do you believe future schools will look like?
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to go back to what normal looks like. I think that when we think about schools, what we need to think about are that they're learning hubs, right? That it's not about you go to school and you get a degree or you get a graduation certificate, that somehow that's the end of your learning. I think what you'll see is a hybrid model where, like kind of what we have now, where students are going to be learning on their own as they get older. I think this is a gradual thing. I mean, right now we have 6-year-olds trying to do distance learning, and that just doesn't work, right? That's just, my 6-year-old can't pay attention to anything for more than 5 seconds, right? So that doesn't work. We're trying it, but it doesn't work. But what I think we'll see is a hybrid model where as students get older, they'll be spending more time on their own. They'll be spending more time in groups. I always saw a vision of a school, not as a building, but as like a shopping complex, right? With like 20 different buildings, and every building is a different thing, right? So here's the math center, the science center, the arts center, and then students just go into different spaces depending on what they're working on. And in the middle are a bunch of spaces with rooms so students can collaborate together. So I think you'll see more of those types of hybrid models in the future.
So I guess really it's a question that curricula need to change. And also we've got a question here saying that do schools need to adapt different criteria for assessing students rather than
Yes, that to me is the most fundamental question that we can ask, because in business, in the nonprofit world, and in education, what gets measured gets done, right? I mean, we all know that what gets measured is what gets done. And so what we're seeing right now with assessments is that what gets measured are test scores. And so what do? We prepare students for tests. But we never ask ourselves, do those tests improve our students' lives? Given the future that we face, is that in any way relevant, right? And so right now during the pandemic, I keep hearing students are falling behind, right? That concept of they're falling, what are they falling behind in, right? They're falling behind in being prepared to take a test. And I don't think that should be the goal. Now, can we go and radically change that? No, but I think what we can do is introduce new concepts. So what I challenge everyone to think about, and there's a number of organizations that are working on this, but how do you measure problem solving? How do you measure critical thinking? How do you measure collaboration? And here's the good news. Any of us who work in the private sector or in the government sector, doesn't matter where you work, at the end of the year, at the end of the work year, no one has to take a test, right? You don't take a test to see if you get your bonus, right? You don't take a test to see how well you did this year. You don't get a grade at the end of your year of work, right? Nothing in your performance review should be a surprise. So we already have some of the fundamental things that we know about how to measure problem solving. Is this employee a problem solver? Is this employee a good collaborator? Is this a good team member? Is this a good, does this employee have initiative? We have all the fundamental things on how to do these, soft skill assessments. What if we just start introducing some of those concepts into education? Keep the tests, keep the assessments, keep all that. But what if we start measuring problem solving, collaboration, like just a little bit at a time? I think if we do that and we do it gradually, in a couple of years, what we'll notice is that we will replace the assessments with these new kinds of ways to measure.
And something that's just come up on the questions as well is something we hear about quite a lot. What do you suggest how to teach about technology when I have so many, right? So with the introduction of technology and the fast pace of it, how can teachers cope with that when they're struggling to learn it themselves and students adapt so quickly?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because I think that, so a couple of things that we have to understand. When you get what I call inside the matrix, you'll realize that all the technology is the same. It's just a different look and version of it. So for example, let's take all the apps. You think about an app as a new technology, right? You think of TikTok, for example, as a new thing. Do you have to learn TikTok? No. Because when you really fundamentally break it down, TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and all those social media apps, they're all the same. They're all doing the same thing. It's all about posting content and having an opportunity to either comment or like or dislike. I mean, it's all the same. So when you look at TikTok, the first thing you should do is, how is this Instagram? And what you'll notice is, okay, so you're not posting pictures, but you're posting videos. Everything else is the same. So recognizing the pattern of technology, that's one thing. Now, at the same time, how to use a DVR is exactly the same as how to use a VCR, right? It's the same technology components. It's the same thing. So I think it's important to spend time, what I call reading the instruction book. So one of the things that I used to, when I was back in the old days when we had VCRs and had to plug in Blu-ray players and all these things, I would always be the tech support. I was always the person who went to the in-laws' house, or I was the person who went to the friend's house because they had the 12 blinking on their VCR and they couldn't set the time. And they'd say, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to set this up. I don't know, help me. And then I'd go and set it up. And then they'd say, how do you know how to do that? And like, is it magic? I'm like, no, I read the instruction manual. That's what I do, right? All these things have instruction manuals in one way or the other. Go find the instruction manual. So for example, when I see a new technology, one of the first things that I do is I go to YouTube, because there's someone who's reviewed it, who's talked about it. Apple releases their new computers with their M1 chip. What's an M1 chip? You go to YouTube, and in 10 minutes, you'll know what an M1 chip is. My point is that it's all out there. You're choosing not to learn about these things because for whatever reason, you might not have the time, but everything that you need to learn how to do something with is out there.
Okay, and it's really interesting. Another one we've had in said, I would love to know which jobs you think we should stop promoting in schools. Which degrees should universities take off their lists of offers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think it's necessarily about taking things off the list. I think it's more about combining things, right? And so I'm working currently for 2 universities, helping them with some strategy things. And one of the things that I always find when I work in higher education is that we get into these discussions of, technology skills versus humanity skills. Like, which one is more important? Like, do we need to focus on technology skills and you get these battles? And the problem is that it's both. It's not one or the other. And so when you go to look at let's say a degree in computer science, and you look at the classes and all the required classes, the problem isn't that it's computer science versus a history degree. It's the fact that none of those history classes are part of the computer science degree. We need to embed humanities into technology, and the same is true in humanities. We have to embed technology. So it's a combination of things. It's not one thing. So that's a silo problem that universities have, because you have the accounting department, and then you have the science department, and then you have the humanities department, and there's degrees within all those, and they're all silos, and they don't talk to each other. And the reality is, what if we had problem-solving departments, right? The climate change department. Well, what are the different ways that we can solve climate change? All of a sudden, now you get into different types of more hybrid models of degrees. And by the way, there is no degree. It's learning until X, going and experiencing that, and then learning again. It's this constant, it's not you go for 4 years. I was having a debate with a New York Times reporter a couple of months ago where he says, the problem is that universities need to teach 40 years of knowledge in 4 years. And I'm like, no. You teach 4 years of knowledge in 4 years, and then you go use that knowledge, and then you learn more. And it's just, so it's this constant approach to learning and education, not just one-time thing. I wish my daughter's university would respond to her, send her an email a year after she graduates and says, hey, Lane, what are you doing today? Oh, you're working in video production. Well, you have a degree in film. You took a lot of video production classes, but there's been so many updates to those classes. Would you like to take a refresher course? Oh, you're working at CNN and you didn't take a journalism class. Would you like to take a journalism class? It's this constant approach to partnership. That's what universities need to be, is partnering with students for the things that need to learn for their future.
Brilliant, thank you. I mean, we've got a few more questions, but what I'll do is I'll pass them on. Unless you're okay for time, it's up to you. But I think we've taken enough time. So thank you so much, Jaime. It's been amazing, and we've had some lovely questions in. So thanks to the audience.
Let me just say that if you have additional questions or if you want to reach out, I'm on LinkedIn. You can easily find me, Jaime Casap. I have a YouTube channel you should subscribe to because I got a lot new things coming out, and I'm on Twitter. My message button is open, so you can reach out that way as well.
Great, and we'll share those links through the platform so people can connect with you as well. So thank you, everyone. It's been a phenomenal day. And don't forget, we've got another full day tomorrow starting at 12 o'clock Dubai time. Thank you and have a great evening or day. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.